All right, here we go. We have our, what do we got? Number three, our third AP exam review. This one was 59 minutes. I think I'll be able to chop it down quite a bit. Always trying to keep them under 20 minutes. But okay, so number three is on sensation and perception. Sensation is any kind of stimuli or information that you are gathering by using your five senses. Okay, this is part of your peripheral nervous system. You gather information from stimuli that are taking place or occurring around you. You're using your eyes, you're using your ears, your nose, your touch, your fingertips, your toes, and then your tongue, right, for taste. Okay, so information that you are gathering using those five senses is then sent to the brain to be processed and labeled. That becomes perception. Okay, so the sensation happens first. You are sensing things around you. Okay, and then once you have processed that, once that information has reached your brain, you label it. Okay. You perceive it to be hot. You perceive it to be spicy. You perceive it to be too loud. Okay. So the perception is once it occurs in the central nervous system. Okay. So sensation is PNS, peripheral nervous system. And then perception is happening in the brain. So it is part of your central nervous system. The brain labels what something tastes like or feels like. It produces our perception of a flavor or a touch sensation or a sound, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, term transduction. Transduction is conversion of one form of energy or stimuli into another, such as when environmental stimuli are turned into neural signals in the central nervous system. Okay. So as we are as we are transforming our sensations into perception, that is transduction. Okay, so you are seeing something in real time. You might not exactly, and this happens like milliseconds, right? But you haven't labeled it yet. As you are about to taste something, you haven't labeled it yet. Maybe walking on beach for the first time, you haven't labeled it yet. Okay, so transduction is what happens as you are gathering sensations and then you are processing them into a perception. Your favorite song is actually just a bunch of frequencies, it's a bunch of sounds, it's a bunch of pitches, it's air flowing through instruments or whatever. Okay. But your brain, your central nervous system is able to form a perception, and then boom, you've got, whatever, some hot song by Cardi B. Your favorite food is really just chemical interactions with your tongue, with your nose, with your taste buds. Okay. You don't actually as you're putting that food into your mouth, your perception hasn't been formed yet. As you're trying some kind of new, let's just say, new dessert for the first time, you haven't perceived what that dessert tastes like, how sweet it is, or how crunchy it is, or whatever it might be. Transduction has to occur, and you have to label that sensation. A funny joke is simply sounds. It's just words. Then once you hear those words, transduction takes place. Your interpretation, your culture, your background, your personal taste in humor will form your perception of whether that joke was funny or not. Okay, so you receive sensory impulses, you relay them to your brain, and then the individual processes and labels that perception. Okay, a few terms here. Sensory threshold. That is the bare minimum you can notice over half the time. Okay, so let's just say somebody farts, right? How often can you pick up in class on that fart, right? If you can place it 6 out of 10 times, that's a sensory threshold. Okay, maybe sounds that are happening, something that you can see in your peripheral vision. Can you notice it 6 out of 10 times? That's your sensory threshold, the bare minimum you can notice over half the time. Difference threshold, that is the change in something that you can detect. So that is the change in a sensation that you can detect. If you are sitting in the classroom taking notes and the temperature is at, let's just say, 70 degrees, if all of a sudden it goes to 71 or 72, can you notice that change? Okay. Or can you only notice it if it all of a sudden gets up to 78? Okay. So what is the bare minimum change in intensity and some kind of sensation that you can detect? It could be the same thing with let's just say, like riding in the car on a road trip, right? Maybe you guys have probably asked for the air to be turned up, or the air to be turned down, or the heat to be turned up, right? What is the bare minimum you can notice? Okay. Maybe some of you guys notice a fly landing on your shoulder, that you can feel that, where some of you guys cannot. You don't have that difference threshold. You put a frozen pizza in the oven and it's being cooked, at what point do you smell that pizza being cooked? For some of you guys, you might smell it a lot sooner than other people. Other people, you might only be able to smell it towards the end when everything has been cooked and it's almost done. Maybe some of you guys, as soon as the cheese starts melting or the pepperoni starts heating up, you can smell it. Okay. Signal detection theory. That is the ability to detect patterns in information despite background noise. Okay, so you are able to detect patterns, to detect stimuli, to detect signals that are happening, taking place, despite there being, conflicting or contrasting background noise. Okay, so can you hear your voice across the room in a public place? Okay, that's kind of called the cocktail phenomenon, right? As part of the signal detection theory. Can you hear your phone ringing across the room if you're at a loud party? Okay. Do you feel your watch vibrate as you're playing soccer or as you're playing baseball or just playing basketball in the backyard? Can you notice that change even though there's background stuff taking place? Okay, that brings us to Weber's law. Weber's law deals with difference threshold, the bare minimum change in intensity we can detect. And the big thing here is intensity matters, right? How loud something is, how vibrant a sight is, how vibrant a sound is. Okay, of course we can all notice the brightness of our cell phone, right? The screen, we can notice that it gives off illumination, but it's much easier to notice it in a dark room than it is outside during the day, right? Intensity matters. So that sight, okay, the illumination of your phone, right? If it's the same illumination, okay, it is much easier to notice in a dark room than in a light room or outside. Okay, the intensity of the light is intensified. It's projected more in a dark room, so we notice it more. Okay, it seems brighter. How about bench press? Okay, let's say you can bench 200 pounds. You could definitely bench 150 pounds. But what if I said 150 pounds for 10 reps? Okay, intensity matters. Let's say you're doing 150 pounds for 10 reps, but somebody sneaks 2.5s on each side. So now it's 155 pounds. Do you notice? Okay. Maybe you don't. But what if they put 10s on each side and made it 170 pounds? Intensity matters. You would probably notice that. Okay. Let's say you like half a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee. Well, you drink that every day, half a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee. But tomorrow, somebody makes coffee for you and they put 2 teaspoons of sugar in your coffee. You would probably definitely notice. Intensity matters. Okay. Next thing, I'm just going to tell you to go back and spend some time reviewing your notes on the vision process, the hearing process, the parts of the eye, retina and iris, and fovea, and all of the optic nerve, all that kind of stuff, and then parts of the ear. Especially the auditory nerve connects the ear to the brain, the cochlea and stuff like that. So make sure you go back and you're looking at how the vision process works and how the hearing process works. I wouldn't spend too much time. Really focusing on that, but definitely be familiar with that, be able to recognize that kind of stuff. Okay, Gestalt principles. This will take us a little bit of time. Gestalt principles. This is the whole concept. The whole is more than the sum of its parts. Okay, remember Gestalt. The whole, the entire picture is more than its individual pieces. We tend, as humans, to focus on the big picture rather than individual details. Okay, so we love our favorite song, but we rarely think about it in its individual parts. Okay, so again, you're hearing whatever that Cardi B song is that you love, and you're jamming, you're rocking out to that song, but you're not really thinking of, oh yeah, here's the percussion, here's the bass, here's the keyboard. No, you're just kind of focused on the overall picture. You rarely think about your car as anything other than your car. You don't think about the carburetor, you don't think about the alternator, you don't think about 4 wheels. You usually just think about it as a whole thing, the car. Now, there's a few laws you got to know here. Okay, law of similarity. That is pretty simple. Law of similarity states that, come on in, that the group, we organize objects together that look the same. Okay, if they look similar, we put them together in a group. Okay, so thank you, appreciate it. So if you see a picture with a bunch of squares, some squares are black, some squares are red, you probably group them together based on color rather than all of them being squares. Okay, you see similar red squares, you're going to notice red squares. You see similar black squares, you're going to put them together black squares. Okay, law of proximity. You organize together based on how close objects are to each other, how we're talking about distance, right? Proximity. If you see a picture that has a group of 4 dots, Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Let's say 2 on top, 2 on bottom, then a space, and then 2 dots. 1 on top, 1 on bottom. You probably group them in 2 different groups. A group of 4, because those 4 dots are close together. Then there was a space in 2. So rather than just grouping them together as 6 dots, you would group them together as 4. The 4 are closest together, and then a second group of 2. Okay, law of continuity. When following lines, okay, so kind of I don't remember exactly how to call it, a line, a array, a segment, that kind of stuff. When following lines, the human eye will follow the easiest pattern. Okay, we want to notice the easiest pattern, the one that requires the least amount of effort for us. Okay, the one with the least changes. So if you see broken lines with spaces, you can still tell it's an arrow pointing to the right. Okay, so if you see an arrow pointing to the right, but it's got some gaps in it, it hasn't been completed, you can still, continue, what that shape is supposed to be. The human eye will still kind of figure that line out. Okay. Law of closure. The human eye can finish circles and shapes that haven't been closed. The easy example here is, handwriting that you've seen, that you've done. Maybe you see on the board or something like that. Let's just say it's a P, a B, a Q, something like that. If they're not all the way closed, you can still piece it together with your eyes, right? Maybe it takes you a millisecond to figure it out, but if the B isn't all the way closed or the P isn't all the way closed, you can still figure out what that letter is, right? The law of closure, you can still make that connection. And the last one here is the law of phi phenomenon. We notice patterns in lights. Okay, so when lights are blinking, we're able to pick up on that pattern. Blinking lights are grouped together. Let's just say a construction zone where they're flashing to the left, or they're flashing to the right, or they're flashing, whatever your speed is. We're able to notice those patterns. Sometimes it looks like they're in motion, right? The arrows are in motion, but we're able to piece that together and notice patterns in these flashing lights. Okay, almost done. Figure ground principle. Your brain will distinguish between the objects it considers to be in the foreground of an image. Okay, we've all seen these, but you will notice what is the main purpose of the picture. You will notice what is the foreground of the picture before you notice what is the background. But you can tell those apart. Okay, if you want the cool examples, think about the famous pictures we've looked at where it's like an old woman, or is it a young girl? If you look at one way, it's an old woman. If you look at another way, it's a young girl. But you probably picked up on one of them first and the other one second. Okay. There's the other one that it's like a large candlestick, like a black candlestick. Or is it 2 people that are face to face? Okay. You probably picked up on it on one of them. Your brain picked up on one of them being the forefront, and then the second one being, a little less of a priority. A perceptual set. We perceive sensations in a setting of expectations, culture, and related sensations. If someone tells you to try a new, amazing Mexican restaurant, it might impact your perception once you visit it, right, Kanan? Right. They say, hey, you got to try this new Mexican place. It's so good. Well, when you get there, you have that expectation. You have that perception already in place that, oh my gosh, I'm about to have this great Mexican dinner. And when you eat it, you're probably going to walk away thinking it was better than it really was. So if you went to that same Mexican restaurant and nobody had told you about it, nobody had recommended it to you, maybe that meal wasn't as good. But you went in with already a perception in place, a perceptual set, and that impacts how you saw realistically solve that meal. How about same kind of thing? If you walk into a restaurant and it smells amazing, okay, you guys have all been there, maybe a steak cooking or something like that, but it smells amazing. That's probably going to impact your perception of your meal. Maybe your meal is better because you were greeted with that smell as you walked in. Okay, this is all operating based on schemas. Okay, schemas. I'll say that again, schemas. These are concepts that organize information in your experiences. They can be stereotypes, right? That they can be social roles that but we all have these ideas, these concepts already in place in our head. Okay, the easiest when we think of stereotypes or to think of presumptions. Okay, it allows us to make shortcuts in our thinking, in our perception. Easy example would be like when you're a little kid, you probably learn real early what a dog is. Okay, but what happens when that little kid sees a cat, or sees a wolf, or sees a coyote or a fox? They probably always think it's a dog, right? They have tails, they have 4 legs, they have a face. So the little kid probably thinks all of those are a dog because they know what a dog is. They already have this presumption in their head. They already have a stereotype of what four-legged furry animals should be. Okay. But the cool thing about schemas is we can revise them. We can improve them. We can edit them. And so the kid can learn that a cat has whiskers. The kid can learn that a fox has a longer, bushier tail or whatever. Okay. So you can adapt, you can evolve the schemas that you have in your head. The last two we have here, pretty simple. You've gone over them, but top down processing and bottom up processing. Top down, think about that. The top of you is your head, it's your brain, it's your mind. We have the finished product in our head as we start. We know the overall objective. We have the quote unquote wholeness or completion of this situation that we're in or a puzzle that we're doing. We don't always need all the small details to figure something out. Remember, just salt. The sum is more than the whole, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. Okay, so do you ever notice your own typos as you're reading something? You probably don't, right? Because you know what you were trying to do. You know what that word was supposed to be. You knew where you were going with that sentence, even though it had a typo in it. How about reading? Do you read every letter in a word? No, you probably don't. If you're reading your favorite book, you're probably not reading every letter. Sometimes you're not reading every word. You can complete some of this without having to do all the finer details. You don't know what my coffee mug right now actually looks like, but if I tell you I'm drinking coffee, you can probably form some kind of really good, accurate idea in your head of the coffee mug that I'm drinking out of. Bottom up processing is just the opposite. That's starting with the small details. Okay, the individual parts, the individual sensations that you need in order to form the overall picture. So we have to use smaller pieces, smaller sensations. We have to piece them together to make sense of the whole. Okay, so now let's go back to reading. When you were learning to read, you had to read each letter. You had to sound out an entire word for it to make sense. Yeah, we talked earlier about prosopagnosia, right? That is face blindness. If you have prosopagnosia, you have to relearn who someone is every time you see their face. You do not have the ability to form a memory based on someone's face. So every time you're meeting this person, you're taking note of all the smaller details and forming together, and hopefully you can kind of figure out who you're talking to, what their voice sounds like, how tall they are, and stuff like that. And boom, you can all of a sudden, oh yeah, that's Cannon Greer. Not that we would ever forget what Cannon Greer looks like. Okay, so bottom up processing relies on gathering data. It relies on piecing together our sensations, taking note of all the small details. Top down processing relies on our previous experiences, our prior knowledge that we have, and we can apply it to whatever situation we're in. Again, going back to reading, right? The older you are, the more experience you have with reading, you don't have to sound out all the words. Okay. You don't have to read every single word either, probably, right? So top-down processing is that famous example of the paragraph where every word is misspelled. I think it's according to a Cambridge study, blah, 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 but every word is misspelled. Okay. You can read that entire thing because you have previous knowledge. You have prior experiences reading it and gathering information. So you're able to piece that together using top-down processing. If you didn't have that prior knowledge, you would probably fumble over those words and you would continuously get stuck because the words are misspelled and you're not able to sound them out the correct way. Okay, that would be bottom up processing. Let's see. So we got 59 minutes down to 18 and a half minutes. Have fun.
Nice. So I